Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to see so many of you here in Geneva as well as online to launch the Global Terrorism Index 2025. It has been a real pleasure to launch the 2025 Global Terrorism Index today with our partners, the Institute for Economics and Peace. The Geneva Centre for Security Policy is proud to have collaborated with the Institute for Economics and Peace since 2015. The GCSP has both contributed to the index substantively, but has also had the honor on multiple occasions to launch it here in Geneva. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Christina Shori-Liang. I lead the counterterrorism PVE work here at the GCSP, and I'm also an adjunct faculty member at the Paris School of International Affairs, Sciences Po. The state of global security and governance has reached a climactic point in human history. We are in the middle of a very violent decade. Since 2020, a series of major wars in Ethiopia, Myanmar, Ukraine, Sudan, and the Middle East has claimed hundreds and thousands of lives. Currently, over a quarter of countries globally are afflicted by some sort of serious violence. The year ahead is unlikely to see much of a let-up. Many of these global conflicts are driven or are significantly influenced by terrorist actors, often involving either jihadist or insurgent groups seeking political, ideological, or religious objectives. As violence increases, policymakers in many capitals seem to be losing interest in making peace. As the president of the International Crisis Group, Comfort Eros, said very eloquently, it is politically easier to make the case for funding missiles than mediators. At the same time, the West has become increasingly unwelcome in areas where terrorism is thriving. This is especially the case in West Africa and the Sahel region, which we will discuss in much greater detail, and which we will learn have become the new epicenters of terrorism. 24 years after the attack on the US soil on September 11th, the West is greatly divided and has lost its appetite for counterinsurgencies in stabilization and state-building efforts. Multiple factors are contributing to this downturn, including the resurgence of geopolitical rivalry. The United States, China, and Russia are increasingly viewing regional conflicts in a zero-sum term. This is especially evident in wars where they are heavily involved, as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Governments are still trying to find better solutions in both preventing and countering violent extremism and terrorism, and policy remains uninformed. National counter-terror policy continues to be marked by political short-termism and strategic illiteracy. As we will learn today from our experts here in the room, there are several reasons why extremism in multiple forms will persist into the foreseeable future. This is why it is important that we continue to try to find important and sustainable solutions to help protect the millions of people who are living under their control. I will now introduce our panelists, Serge Strubans, Isaka Ouedraogo, and Lila Schumicky-Logan. Let me first begin with Isaka Ouedraogo. Isaka is a former executive fellow at the GCSP, where he frequently speaks and teaches about West African geopolitics. He's the director of Sahel Politica, a Swiss-based political risk analysis consultancy advising government and corporate clients on how West African geopolitics affects their strategies and operations so that they can seize opportunities for profitable growth and positive social impact. He's also a foresight practitioner with a broad experience spanning over 17 years at the intersection of intelligence, policy analysis, and African affairs. His extensive experience includes roles as serving over 7 years with the Swiss Army's Center for Electronic Operations and acting as deputy team leader at the Africa desk of the Federal Intelligence Service Strategic Analysis Division. Previously, he held a legal advisory function within the Task for Asset Recovery of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs Directorate of International Law, and he has also worked as policy advisor in the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, among other roles. Dr. Lila Schumicky-Logan is the Deputy Executive Director and Head of Portfolio Management at the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund. She holds MAs in both philosophy and cultural anthropology and her PhD in Peace Studies department in the UK at the University of Bradford. Her areas of expertise include reintegration, rehabilitation of at-risk youth in conflict and post-conflict settings with a focus on social skills development. Laila has worked in universities, NGOs, and the United Nations in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Gambia, Kenya, Lebanon, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Switzerland, Syria, and Uganda. She also has worked on humanitarian development programs focusing on Bangladesh, Mali, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Tunisia. Thank you so much. And now, and finally, our key speaker who will present this year's Global Terrorism Index briefing, index, Dr. Serge Dubans. He's the Director of Operations for Europe and the MENA region at the Institute for Economics and Peace. He's also a former colonel in the Belgian Armed Forces with an academic specialization in political sciences, international relations, security, defense. He's also global risk analysis. He also does global risk analysis and crisis management. He is also an assistant professor at Vasilius College in Brussels, teaching courses on NATO and the transatlantic approaches to security on global terrorism and radicalization. And he's considered one of the most important specialists on global terrorism and radicalization in Belgium and in Europe. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Treaty Association, the Irish College of KU Leuven, and the Global Governance Institute, as well as founder of BANS Consulting, his own strategic security consultancy company. So I'm now, as you can see, we have a lot of bandwidth here, a lot of experience, a lot of wonderful people who have worked on counterterrorism efforts all over the world. So I will now give the floor to Colonel Serge Dubans, who will present to us the Global Terrorism Index of 2025. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you to all of you for attending the launch today, either here in the room or online. So I will just go through the PowerPoint that we have put together to give you the main results, the main trends of this year's Global Terrorism Index. So, first of all, a few words about who we are. So we are a non-partisan independent think tank. What we do is measure and quantify peace, working at the intersection between business, economics, and peace. Basically, also trying to explain to the world that you can also achieve peace by preparing peace. So if we continue, so we are based in Sydney, Australia. This is where all the research is done. And as you can see, we have offices distributed through the world, all over the world. I'm leading the office in Brussels. I have a colleague in Nairobi and an architecture which is comparable in the Americas, an office in New York, of course, serving both the UN in New York and I would say, Washington, DC, and also an office in Mexico City. Mexico is the only country in which we do produce a national peace index at the moment. So what is the Global Terrorism Index? I think we need to understand that we need to start from a common, I would say, common definition. So if you can do the next slide, please. A common definition where we basically put the, one back, please. Where we can definitely put forward this idea of non-state actors. So that's what we are looking at. And definitely also with this idea to commit violence or the fear of violence, use violence against a non-discriminating group to basically put forward an agenda which can be political, religious, economic, or whatever. So we use the terrorism tracker produced by Dragonfly, which we press through 4 indicators: incident, injuries, death, and hostages, all with a different weight. What we also do is try to reproduce in figures, in statistics, the psychological effect or longer-term effect of a terrorist attack. So that's why over a period of 5 years, we take half of the value of the year before. So that's also why later on, when you will see maps with the color codes, the impacts countries in green are countries which did not experience any terrorist attack in the past 5 years. So let's have a look at the results. So let's dive into it. Okay, so that's the map I was talking about. So there already you have the color code showing you, nope, and we need to come back. One, showing you the color code, of course, from green, those countries without any attacks in the past 5 years, to, of course, dark red and even almost brown countries most impacted in this year Global Terrorism Index. So this already shows you some form of concentration in the Sahel, in what we call South Asia, and you can see, of course, Pakistan highlighted there, and a smaller or maybe not such an important impact anymore at the moment in the MENA region. For those who are interested, for those who do research on this is available on our website called visionofhumanity.org. You can access all the reports, the 4 pages, this PowerPoint, and also the maps and the data. So this is an interactive map. You can go on the other website, click on the country you are interested in, you will get access to all the data valid for this country. So if we look at the key findings for 2025, we see that the number of terrorist deaths remained constant around 7,500 in 2024. We also see that there is a small decrease in the number of attacks by 3%, close to 3,500. So we are basically not seeing a lot of difference compared to the previous years. Where the difference lies is in the number of countries which experienced a terrorist attack or a terrorist incident in the past year. We go from 58 to 66. And also the number of countries who deteriorated is higher than the number of countries which improved on the index or compared to the year before. Again, this year, 98% of all terrorist deaths occurred in the conflict zone. So there's a clear correlation there between conflict and the use of terrorism as a technique and procedure. And we need to know, and I will show you this in my last slide of this presentation, that we are today at the highest level, the highest number of conflicts since the end of the Second World War. We came up with this figure last June, with the Global Peace Index. We were at 56. 59 by the end of 2024, 69 today. So that's the evolution since June, plus 13, and we were already at the highest level in June last year. So when we look at the 4 deadliest terrorist groups, and I will show them to you before, we see that they killed 11% more people than in 2024. So we can clearly see that they have been very, very active. So TTP, which is basically the Pakistani Taliban, is the fastest growing terrorist organization, with deaths up by 90%, close to 560. We have now 7 Western countries in the worst 50 countries. So in the top 50 of the Global Terrorism Index, we have now 7 Western countries. We see that 93% of all deaths in the West have been caused by lone actors. And that lone actors are also 3 times more likely to be successful than groups. So we'll see later on in my presentation that the bulk of the attacks in Europe is now related to lone wolf actors or lone actors. The Islamic State and its affiliates, it's still the world deadliest groups in 2024, active in 22 countries, which is 1 more than 2023. So definitely still expanding and becoming much more sophisticated than they were before. So if we continue, the Sahel is still the most affected region globally, accounting for over half of all terrorist deaths in the world. And we, of course, see Burkina Faso most impacted also, although we saw a drop in the number of attacks and the number of deaths. Clearly there, an evolution, but still most impacted. A fifth of all terrorist deaths globally were in Burkina Faso, followed by Pakistan and Syria. We see that Niger and Pakistan are the largest increase in death from terrorism last year, while with 94% for Niger and 45% for Pakistan. Pakistan is steady, is growing steady, or at least the impact is growing steadily. For Niger, it's really going, it's like a yo-yo, it's going up and down, which is showing basically a huge lack of resilience and stability in the country. Sometimes you take a measure and you have a good year, the next year is basically the opposite, and you are really targeted by terrorism. So clearly no resilience there and no stability in this country, or at least this part of the world. That's another visualization of the impact of terrorism globally. So it was quite fast, but you could see where it was. Again, yeah, these three regions. So definitely the epicenter in the Sahel region, South Asia with a concentration on Pakistan, and still, I would say some presence, also some impact in the MENA region. All right, so that's the top 10 of the most impacted countries by terrorism in 2024. So we see Burkina Faso still number one. So as I said to you, or as I explained in the past years, last year was the first time that it was neither Afghanistan or Iraq on number one. So the Sahel is really, they're taking up their places. And of course, we see Pakistan and Syria climbing in the Global Terrorism Index, so being more impacted. Mali is doing a bit better, but still fourth most impacted country in the world. Nigeria, both climbing also. Afghanistan, there again, I will say that's 5 years in a row. The Taliban in Afghanistan are now state actors, so are not anymore, I would say, in the figures of the Global Terrorism Index. So that's why you might see an improvement in the figures, but in the reality, of course, we continue to monitor different groups active in the region, and especially ESKP active in Afghanistan and the wider region also. So when we look at the 5 countries most impacted, this is where we see that there is again an increase in the number of casualties in those 5 countries, while we continue to fall in the rest of the world also. So this geographical concentration of terrorism in those 5 most impacted countries, that's also a type of information that I deliver every year. And it's really amazing to see that we continue to see an increase in those 5 countries while the rest of the world is decreasing or stabilizing. Those are basically the top 10 of the Global Terrorism Index. Well, what is this slide telling you? That 86% of all deaths from terrorism occur just in those 10 countries. So there again, a very strong concentration of the impact. And as I said before, 20% of all terrorism deaths occur in Burkina Faso. Yeah, so let's look at the trends in terrorism. So basically, we are going to open the time window to about 10 to 15 years. And of course, we look basically at 2018, which was just after the peak. So we see that since 2018, deaths from terrorism have fluctuated in a very narrow band between 6,008 and 7,005. So we are quite constant when it comes to the number of casualties on an annual basis. The largest decline since 2018 were Burkina Faso, Niger, and Pakistan, although those three are now super impacted. And the largest improvement were in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. Somalia and Iraq are definitely success stories at the moment. We see that over the past 15 years, the impact in Iraq has decreased by 99%. So this national policy there on CT and PCV in Iraq is really effective. We are collaborating with the government over there. We are collaborating with the EU assistance mission. We have trained people interfaith in Erbil and other places. That's definitely something where we need to keep an eye on, because that's a success story at the moment. Let's keep it this way. And I spoke about Afghanistan before. In the West, we have seen a peak of the attacks in 2017, which is basically a more broader plateau between, I would say, 14, 15 up to 2017. Since then, we saw a decrease every year, which was very positive. Last year, we saw an increase again by 60% to 52 attacks. So clearly a change in trend. We need to confirm the trend, but we can clearly see that we have been more targeted in the West than the years before. And we can look at maybe, what's happening outside of the West or outside of our countries as an implication in our countries also. So external and internal security are very blurred, I would say, borders or lines over there. And we can clearly see, as you can see on the slide also, that anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents really surged since the start of the war in Gaza. That in Europe, Australia, and the US also. So that's, I would say, graphic. So if we can come back on this one. So a graphic, I would say, definition of this evolution. So you can clearly see the evolution going down for 4 or 5 years since the peak of 16, 17. After that, some kind of a plateau, maybe a change in trend at the moment. I think 2 more information for that graph is definitely also this increase of the impact in the Sahel. while the other regions have been decreasing since then. But look at Pakistan. Pakistan is growing again when it comes to the impact. And what always strikes me when I see this graph is this lower part, the gray part, which is basically telling you that terrorism is still a global threat. If you take away this, all those conflicts and those wars and those insurgencies in which you see terrorism occurring, while you still have a basis of terrorism worldwide, which is impacting us every year. So this is showing you the terror attacks in the West and by motivation. So you can clearly see that we are at a lower level now than we had in since the peak in 2017. You can also clearly see this increase compared to last year. And what's really interesting there is to see that, of course, when we look at the claimed attacks, we can see that political motivations, so that would be far left, far right, is still the number one reason or the number one cause for people to use terrorism as a technique, followed, of course, by religious motives. But as you can see over the years, the religious motives is not really there anymore. And if it has increased over the past 2 years, this is clearly linked to this anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents. What we see there is this huge number of unclaimed attacks, mostly linked to some lone wolf actors who basically do not claim to be part of a group, and for which groups are not also claiming the responsibility of the acts of those lone actors. So that's really a tendency which we see in the West, or an evolution which we can see in the West. Let's see, move forward. So let's have a look, or closer look at this homegrown lone wolf terrorism or lone actors that I spoke about before. So what we see today is that, especially in the West, only 8% of all attacks in the West have been carried out by a group. So when we look at, the impact of those coalitions against the Islamic State, coalitions against Daesh, or the work we have been doing in northeastern Nigeria, for example, we see that the effects of this security crush on them took away the capacity to really project themselves, especially in more organized, more stable, and more resilient countries like the Western countries also. So they decided basically to have an indirect impact on us by radicalizing, sometimes very quickly, mostly young people who then commit the attacks and continue to destabilize the countries in which we live. What we see today also is that radicalization goes much faster. So when in 2002 it took 16 months to radicalize someone, 10 months in 2015, today we talk about days and weeks for radicalization. And what we also see, most of those people radicalizing would be young people, and you see the figures over there. When we take the number of attackers under 18, 42% in the UK, 1 out of 5 in Europe. And we also see, and that's why, you had this big portion of unclaimed or undetermined type of attacks. We also see that they don't get influenced by one ideology. They basically go online, pick and choose whatever they want or whatever they like, radicalize themselves very quickly, and move to the terrorist act, become very violent very quickly also, for obvious reasons. And the reasons are there. Basically, they don't feel represented in society. They are isolated, maybe mental health, this tendency to like violence at some point also. And where is this happening? Well, everywhere. But mostly social media, gaming platform, very strange forums also, some encrypted apps, the dark web. I mean, we spoke about my own company. We do a lot of open source intelligence in those areas. It's just amazing to see what's available out there. And they basically pick and choose whatever they want, radicalize themselves, but basically radicalize in violence rather than in an ideology. So that's what we need to understand. It's going very fast. And as you can imagine, for intelligence security services, it's very, very difficult to stop this type of attacks, because they basically have to filter the entire, or almost the entire population, and not just identified people being part of a group or being part of a radicalization, organized radicalization process. So when we look at these lone wolf attacks as percentage of as percentage of the attacks, you can clearly see the evolution there, where now the vast majority of the attacks are perpetrated by lone actors. So we can clearly see there a change in tendency. So it's not the largely organized groups which are going to support those attacks. That's because, for the reasons that I explained to you. The second reason is also that more and more of those attacks, like far left, far right, are committed in the West also nowadays. And we also know that for this type of terrorism, there is not such a global form of terrorism. Of course, you see the manifesto. Of course, you see the ideology online, but you don't find these larger groups like the Islamic State for the more religiously, and I don't like the term, but religiously inspired forms of terrorism. You don't find it back for far right and far left. So also there, a reason why you see more and more of those attacks being committed by lone wolves and not claimed by larger groups. So when we look at the number of foiled and launched attacks for jihadist plots in Europe by group size, for example, over a period of about 25 years or even more, we see that, of course, it's much more difficult that lone wolf jihadist plots much more likely to be successful than those carried out by group. It's also logic, when you're alone, you're not on the radar, you radicalize yourself and you go straight to the core. It's very difficult to identify you and to stop you. I think intelligence security services have really well mapped out existing groups in our societies. They have a closer eye on this and are much more able to stop them whenever possible. It's almost impossible for those lone actors. So if we continue, let's have a look at the Sahel, and then the last portion will allow me to have a closer look also on the Islamic State. Well, when you look at the Sahel, it's basically more than half of the global terrorism impact or global terrorism debt in 2024. We can clearly see that Western and African influence in this region is basically decreasing, and therefore we see the influence of Russia and China growing. And for at least one of those two actors, this is not happening in a peaceful way. But this is adding to the violence existing in the region. Of course, it's part of a broader conflict, and 25,000 deaths so far, with only 20% or less being allocated to terrorism, which is, as I explained before, just the technique used within this combat and in conflict also. Of course, we see a lot of complex issues. I'm not going to go too deep because I know that one of the speakers can go much deeper on that afterwards. So we can clearly see basically lack of basic governance and then everything which goes along with them, the reality of the region, the presence of resources also. And yeah, that's the perfect mix to basically create conflict in which terrorism is used. As you can see, the deaths are up 10 times since 2019. JNIM is the dominant group. The Islamic State in Western Africa is on decline. So basically there we see also kind of an internal fight, which we see almost on the global scale, also happening between those groups. And of course, we see the spread to Western Africa and countries which are at risk also. Over the past year, we spoke about, of course, Togo, Benin, Ghana, and maybe some of the coastal countries also in Western Africa. So when we speak about the Sahel, basically we are talking in primary way also about Western Africa. All right, so that's a more graphic, or that's a graph we can use to show that to you, so we can clearly see there in a decrease in other regions of the world and an increase in the Sahel, first of all, and second of all, we can clearly see different groups having different impacts and some growing, some declining also. At the end of the day, you have seen the number of casualties created in this region, so definitely. Yeah, we need to keep our eye on this and definitely put our attention on this also. So that's a map showing you basically the intensity of the attacks, or the recurrence of the attacks over there. As you can see, border regions between countries, but also within countries also, presence of resources. In the past years, we've shown slides like this with the vicinity of gold mines, especially in this region, where you saw that violence would flare up in this region. And basically, there also terrorism is one form of violence which is used in the conflict there and in the destabilization of this region. If we look at the Islamic State, there again, we can clearly see an increase of their activities and of their successes. When we look at this, we see that IS is still the most deadly terrorist group. Of course, we see that they have a very decentralized network of affiliates almost all over the world, and each group acts very independently, active in 22 countries, which is one more than last year. So the group is very well active and very healthy, I would say. Syria and the DRC recorded the most IS-related fatalities last year. Syria alone, 280 out of the 469 attacks. So we can clearly see where those groups are very, very active at the moment. If we shift regions, we see that ESK or ESKP has grown rapidly from one country in 21 to 5 in 24. Active in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, and Central Asia, basically having an impact over there. And as I will show you later on also, they are becoming much more sophisticated in the way they approach this and they do this. And we see plots foiled in many, many Western countries also in 2024. So 24 IS plots foiled in the West also. So that's something we need to take into account also. So that basically the caliphate, as we can see today, or at least the regions and the countries in which the Islamic State or the affiliates have been active and have committed attacks in 2024. So you can see it's still a very large portion of the world, a very large region, as said, in a very loose, decentralized organization. This is showing you the death to Islamic State by country and region groupings also. So you can clearly see an evolution there. Some regions being more impacted as we move forward in time. Some other countries or some other regions less impacted as we move forward in time. Clearly, as I said to you before, and that's what we need to remember, the most prolific group in the world still today. All right, the death attributed to the Islamic State, so we can clearly see a peak. But when you look at, all the years after the peak, we saw somewhere, if I can read well, like 2015, 16, it's not such a huge evolution there. We can see that there is a constant impact of the Islamic State globally after, I would say, the peak that they generated in 2016. Well, clearly, over the past decade, their impact has been quite stable and quite at the same level. That's basically explaining to you that ESKP or ESK propaganda is now, one back please, is now basically through the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, it is available in 10 different languages and in many, many countries throughout the world. So if you want to get radicalized, if you want to get influenced, this is now possible in your own language, especially in that region, in that part of the world. So they get much more sophisticated in the way they approach youth, the way they approach potential potential lone actors also in the West, and are able to educate them or influence them with very fancy, propaganda, with very fancy narratives, with very fancy videos, all augmented by artificial intelligence and all translated also and adapted through artificial intelligence when they approach potential recruits. That's my last slide before the propaganda slide saying that IAP is a great organization, of course. I think, remember what I said in the beginning, 98% of all terrorist attacks occur in a conflict. When we look at the nature of conflict today, that's what you can see on the top. We see that in the 1970s, 50% of the conflicts resulted in a victory and 23% finished with a peace agreement. In the 2010s, this went down to less than 10 or 5%. So basically, when you start a conflict today, you're not going to finish this the next year or the next 6 months. So when conflicts cannot be solved nowadays. So you need to understand that this evolution that I explained to you in the beginning, 56, 59, 69 today, those conflicts are here to stay. And we know that there is a correlation between the acts of terrorism or the tactics and procedure of terrorism within conflict. So if we have conflicts which cannot be resolved and the number is only increasing, we can expect that the impact of terrorism is also going to increase in the coming years. It's almost arithmetics when you think about it. And that's the end of my presentation. As I said before, we are a great organization. You can follow us on our social media. And as I explained to you before, you can definitely go on our website and access all the data and all the reports and all the PowerPoints that I used today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Serge. And the Institute for Economics and Peace have always done great global terrorism indexes, but I think this is one of the finest ones I've seen so far. So I'm now going to pass the floor to Isaka Wadrugo. I'm going to ask him some questions. We're going to dig deeper into the Sahel. And I've prepared some questions for you, but please elaborate if you want on any of these. Okay, so let me start. In a brazen attack last September 17th, 2024, jihadis killed dozens of students at an elite police training academy. They stormed Bamako's airport and set the presidential palace plane on fire. It shows that jihadist groups with links to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, Daesh, have killed thousands and now displaced millions in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And they've been largely overshadowed by the wars in Ukraine, the Middle East, and the Sudan. So conflicts in the Sahel are now rarely being reported or are in the headlines. So what do you think should be done immediately to prevent more such attacks as this one, this brazen attack in September? And what can we do to stop this from happening?
That's $1 million question. Thank you for inviting me. And first I will start by congratulating Mr. Stroban and IEP for the report. No surprise there. As usual, the data is well collected and the trends are realistic in the increase and the analysis is good as well. So I was not surprised that, for instance, the Sahel and Burkina Faso particularly tops the ranking. Why? Just remember that if you look at the jihad, the heaviest territorial footprint of Geneva and the Islamic State is in Burkina Faso. He referred about Mali until the Reconquista of Kidal, Anefis, and so on, with the help of the Russian PMCs, Mali had a very territorial footprint of the groups. Niger, I don't remember that they ever really lost territory. But Burkina Faso, if you recall, 2 years ago, when the military took power, they said, look, we are coming into power because 50% of a territory, which is almost 5 times larger than Switzerland, is under active control of the groups or under heavy influence. Last 2 weeks ago, the new prime minister of the junta made his State of the Nation speech. And there he claimed that now government forces retook around 71% of the territory, which means in negative an admission that 29% of the territory is still controlled. So congratulations on that. And so this is just a preliminary observation to show how important is the work that the IAP does for policymakers, because with correct figures, you can also articulate policy and strategy. So let me come back to your question. So what can we do? I'm no policymaker. I'm but a humble consultant and analyst. I help my clients in West Africa, mostly humanitarian agencies such as the Swiss development agencies and NGOs, to navigate the local politics and their implications for the operation and strategy. So don't expect prescriptions for me. I'll probably, responding to all of your questions, be fluctuating between an acknowledgement of what we all want in a rule-based domestic order and a rule-based international order, and the reality of it, which is more and more illiberal, more and more power politics driven. So bear with me if you don't hear ideal answers. So I think right now, in the short term, there is almost nothing you can do to prevent such attacks, because the attack you referenced was about when?
September
2024. Just this month of Ramadan, the holy month where Muslims fast, it's a great month for jihadists because according to their doxa and credo, when you die, you are martyred during the Ramadan, you have higher chances of reaching paradise. So there is in Burkina Faso at least, there were like 7 string of attacks the last this month, with casualties mounting to the 200s, attributed to the terrorist groups. I'm not even thinking about how the CT, the counterinsurgency response, has also sometimes negative human rights effects. So let's look at it from a government response perspective. Counterinsurgency. Ideally, we should, and it is known, strengthen local intelligence network, build rapid response coordination across government agencies, equip the forces, train them with also aerial equipment, surveillance, and so on. Let's check what is being done. Equipment, last year I think I made an overview over the capabilities of the local armies. This is not current anymore because they upgraded with support from Russia, China, Turkey. They upgraded equipment, training, recruitment, and they've been on the offensive. So, check. But if we look at it from a human security perspective, what you should be doing would be to stabilize the vulnerable communities by building trust to counter the recruitment pools of the jihadis and providing services. This is how we stabilize the situation. Mrs. Roban was talking about northern Nigeria. I think part of the recipe were used there to stabilize the region. So I don't know what to say. I think he said something interesting about if you take a look at conflicts in the 70s, outcome, you either had victory or peace agreement. In the conflict between the insurgency in the Sahel, both sides want victory. It's like Ukraine, Russia before Donald Trump came. I'm not taking sides here, I'm just observing. Either side want victory. The jihadi, because they say this government is corrupt, any case they are heretics, and we want to establish the caliphate. And the governments, they said, okay, we had international support to fight the insurgency. Didn't work. Local civilian governments were totally inept, corrupt, and so on. So we came to fight the war. We fight until we win. That's why you realize that mediation initiatives, be it from the international level, regional level, doesn't work right now because there is no demand for it. So unless you see in the medium to long term ray of hopes in political settlement, which is not coming right now, I don't expect the trend to stop. What I can analyze is how efficiently can the local governments do counterinsurgency Russian style or Algerian style, and what are the chances for them to win?
Thank you so much. We're going to talk now a little bit about the new organization, the new Alliance of Sahel States, created in September 2024. The 3 landlocked countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, created the Alliance of Sahel States, and they withdrew from ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. How optimistic are you of the alliance of the Sahel states and their ambition to step forward with common security and economic aspirations?
There, I think it should be said that the alliance of Sahelian states, if we look at what they are, their nature, they started with a defensive alliance, NATO style. But then they upgraded to a confederacy. Actually, they have a treaty founding a confederation of the three states, which means there is a misnomer in the name. They were talking about federation. Switzerland is a federation, although it's called a confederation. But there it's truly a confederation, which means they put in common defense, diplomacy, and development. And the ambition there is to truly coordinate those aspects and move incrementally toward a federation. I'm expecting in the coming months even a parliamentary dimension that they are trying to develop. Then let's do a checklist again. Defense. This is where they are truly advanced, because first they have the common foreign allies. It's Russia, it's China, it's Turkey. And they have a common goal: wipe out the jihadists. And they're really coordinated, because on news outlets, on public television, if you care to watch, you'd see that each week they make a media reportage on drone strikes on terrorist bases. So they gave themselves opportunity to pursue militants across border, up to 100 kilometers. The drones are coordinated. So there it's work. Intelligence-wise, it work as well. Because if you recall, 2 months or 3 months ago, NGOs, American NGOs employees were expelled from Niger. And one of them, a Swiss national, went to Ouagadougou, and he was immediately arrested and detained for like 3 days before being let go. Thanks God. But this shows that the coordination there works. The problem is the challenge is too great, and regional cooperation with other states from ECOWAS is not working. There is a rapprochement with Chad, which is the biggest security provider in West Africa. There is a rapprochement with Ghana after the former president, who was very hostile to the IS countries, went, and there is a new one who pragmatically want to curry the favors of the IS state, because what you have to remember as well is that the IS states are landlocked. They import and export their goods from where? From the coastal states. Ivory Coast is very hostile to the IS. Togo is allied. And Ghana see, there is a market to be taken here from Ivory Coast. So defense-wise, I think the prospects are good if they keep it up, and if the conjuncture is favorable, and if the regimes don't fall. Because there is a scenario where there is a civic blowback if, for instance, let's say in the case of Mali or Burkina Faso, human rights abuses goes beyond a level that touched the political basic support they have. But the other side, development, Russia doesn't do development. They don't have the money for it. China does, and is really invested in it. But the fiscal conjunctures, because if the economy doesn't work, the state cannot gather money, and development aid has almost stopped with USAID cutting funds. So this has an impact. I don't expect the economic side to go as fast and as successful as the defense side.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to pass the floor now over to Laila. Laila, you've just heard from Insako the situation in Western Sahel. How do you think national governments can do better involved in getting in their anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism efforts in the region?
Thank you very much, Christina. And before I respond, let me just congratulate Serge and IEP on this great report, and thank you for GCSP for inviting GSURF. And let me also thank the colleagues, many of them here from GSURF, and just to say that I am by no means an expert in the Sahel. All my knowledge comes from them, who are sitting here, and the partners in the countries and our advisors. Now, those who are maybe less familiar with GSURF, we are a global fund that provides grants to local civil society organizations with the objective to prevent violent extremism and terrorism. So just going back to your question, what can national governments do in order to combat terrorism beyond the kinetic approaches? There have been a lot of positive changes, I think also. I mean, we have heard it from our colleague that they have recuperated several areas, although 30% in Burkina Faso, for example, is still under control. But there have been economic growth in Burkina Faso. Let me just give you a couple of very concrete numbers. So the GDP has increased in Burkina from 18.8 million to 22 billion during the last 2 years. There have been gold mines that have been nationalized, and there have been a gold refinery inaugurated in Burkina Faso that hasn't been there before. There has been an economic diversification in Burkina. There is now the first state-owned bank that has been established, which is quite spectacular. And there has been a heavy investment into fish farming in order to enhance domestic production. There has been also investment in agricultural modernization, tractors, motor pumps, different boosts have been made into the local economy in order to increase production of crops. There has been also infrastructure development in Burkina. There is a new airport that is going to be finished by the end of the year. There is a new motorway that is connecting major town and Ivory Coast. But that's not to say that social reforms and gaining the hearts and minds, and I'm sorry to use this terminology, but this is very important. So in terms of the social reforms, and I think that has given a lot of boost to the Burkina and support, is that the current captain, Traoré, has cut the salaries of the parliamentarian with 30% and increased civil servant salary with 50%. And this is where you get a lot of buy-in. But this is clearly not enough. And that's why GSURF existence is there, or GSURF exists, because prevention is extremely important, but you cannot just do prevention blindly. So what we are supporting here is to engage with civil society that is still very much there and very lively in these countries, although there has been a lot of restrictions on them, especially the international one. And we know that a lot of the international organizations have been asked to leave the countries for very small mistakes, where the national governments were not involved or they were not aware of the activities. And that's why this facilitating this collaboration and cooperation, building this bridge between local civil society organizations and national governments is so key to enhance these other gains that have been there to secure the territories and the economic prosperity that is slowly but surely it's growing. Because I mean, yes, Burkina is number 1, yes, Mali is number 4, but it's less attacks, significantly less attacks, less number of deaths that there have been last year or the year before. We can't say the same about Niger, though. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more on how communities can be engaged in the efforts to combat extremism. What are you doing on the prevention level?
Thank you. So in the Sahel specifically, we are focusing on two areas, which hasn't really been mentioned in the reports here, but one of them is to engage with those that have been disengaging from the radicalized or various groups like GNIM and others, and support them with rehabilitation and integration, reintegration efforts, with a specific focus also on psychosocial and mental health support. This is something that hasn't been talked about, and we do know that very often the reason why people joining these groups is not because of ideological reasons. They are not convinced to killing people is gonna get them to paradise. It's very much because of lack of hope, lack of prosperity, lack of access to economic and social opportunities. Therefore, by engaging with former disengaged, I don't want to call them former fighters and so on, but or those that have been victims of terrorism, it's a large number of people, and that does give a push for communities to see that they are receiving care. Someone minds them. They feel that there is potentially hope. So this is one angle of the support that we are doing in the Sahel. The second one is really supporting the strengthening of the social ecology, primarily through economic opportunities. But here we have to be very, very clear. And I think this is also an area where GCSP can further improve in terms of the support that we are providing to the civil society organizations that are carrying out these activities, that this economic support has to be long-term. It has to be through the entire cycle, meaning that providing specific skills that have specific needs and demands in the local markets, mentoring through these businesses and skills, ensuring that there is these businesses don't fail that are being set up, and there is the right targeting. Because Serge, you have mentioned that having engagement with really the most vulnerable communities is key to prevent people to join. Therefore, the targeting has to be really, really precise. And how you can do that is by collaborating with people on the ground, which are civil society, local, national authorities, local leaders, whether they are religious or traditional. And I believe that combining this non-securitized approach with the engagement of the authorities and the whole spectrum of the society is one very good way to contribute to the prevention. And we would like to claim, GCSP very modestly though, that the efforts, and we have invested over $18 million into nearly 70 organizations in the Sahel since 2016, has been contributing, building this resilience in Mali, in Burkina, and partially in Niger, although I do see the decline there for the moment.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to go from smart power, soft power to hard power again. So how are Russia's growing ties with military groups and governments in West Africa, such as the Wagner Group, now it's called the African Defense Forces, influencing the security landscape in West Africa?
I think the Wagner in Africa, or the Russian PMCs in Africa, their how do you call that? Their face is in Mali. Since they deployed in Mali, from there Russia gradually connected with Burkina Faso, then Niger. There is a distinction to be made there. Russia military footprint with fighting personnel is only in Mali. And they took part in combat, in reconquista of the northern towns. And this is a confusion that is normal, but in Burkina Faso, they don't have fighting personnel. In Niger, to my knowledge, they don't have fighting personnel. The relationship there is about the provision of intelligence, training, and weapons. Because one of the reasons the IS state pivoted from Western alliance and went out of ECOWAS, one of the main reasons was that we cannot equip and train our troop to a level where we can take on the jihadi. And Russia facilitated that. And there again, it's good to not only focus on Russia, because if you look at images and videos of the weapons import in Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, which is highly publicized for political mobilization reasons, you see armored vehicles from companies, Turkish companies, Norinco's, Chinese companies. You see drones from Turkey, first generation, second generation. And you have also advisors from those countries advising the armed forces on the use of those weapons and on training and equipment. And also, I think the argument with the Russian relationship with the IS state is, resources against protection. Where it makes sense is that if you remember when the putsch happened in Niger, ECOWAS threatened to intervene militarily. And knowing that ECOWAS don't have the military logistics and capabilities to do it alone, the IS state assumed that they will have backing from Western militaries. So the Russian connection there is kind of like the nuclear umbrella that the United States provides to Europe against military intervention and regime change. This is one of the reasons. Second reason, as I said, it's the procurement of weapons, training, and no question asked. It's also, let's say, for other states, there is a market to be won there. And there is an ideological component there as well, because the relationship is transactional. It may not be ideal for the rule-based domestic order, but this is what they feel they want. So if I look at the future, I see this relationship remaining, because if I take a look at the regional environment and the international environment, knowing that Russia and the United States are negotiating right now, maybe it may happen that it would, in coming years, not be such an heretical thing that the IS countries are in relationship with Russia. And I see also quietly the Chinese and the Turks having more footprint diplomatically, economically, and defense-wise with the IS state. I wouldn't say it's a bad or a good thing. I would say it's an expression of the agency of those states, which is downplayed, but we have to accept that they have agency. It may not please us, but accepting that they have agency would help us better read their moves and see how we can engage smartly.
Thank you. I'm just going to push you a little bit harder on the question of China and China's Belt and Road Initiative. How is it shaping West Africa's infrastructure and trade dynamics, and what implications does it have for the extremism in the region?
This is interesting, because I get sometimes this question about the Belt and Road Initiative and how it relates to West Africa. I think China's focus, as far as I know, is about the coastal states, because the Belt and Road is about roads, transportation, and also the maritime aspect is important for China to import resources, energy, and stuff from West Africa. So, and also the military dimension with naval bases are also important, because I've been reading some think tanks reports from Washington and Brussels who worry a lot about that. So the real focus, I think the Sahel per se is not strategic enough for this focus. They invest heavily. For instance, to go along what my colleague was saying, the president of Burkina Faso just inaugurated a cement plant, a new one in Burkina Faso. The Chinese are building one of the biggest hospital that the country ever has in Bobo-Dioulasso, the second town. They're investing in mining infrastructure. So there again, it's similar to the relationship with Russia. The needs for even counterinsurgency, you need roads and transportation to facilitate winning the war. And for that, you also need those infrastructure to build the development without which you will still have terrorism. So it's highly transactional. And just a quick anecdote, people focus on Russia, but President Traore has a special advisor from Chinese nationality, a business mogul, who is pushing most of what she said, the investment from China. We don't have a Russian special advisor. So I think there is a blind spot there where we focus so much on defense and ideology and forget that other actors like Turkey and China are building a more sustainable footprint for the future. And it's not good or bad, it depends on what the African agency will do with it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just one more question to Laila, and then we're going to open the floor to questions because you're all here, and I'd like you to have a room as well to ask questions. So just one last question to you. How can we improve the access to education and economic opportunities? I think microloans is something that's a really huge issue, and as a way to counter the appeal to extremist ideologies, because extremists are actually giving people jobs. And what role, and just to add on to, what role do women play in strengthening the social cohesion in the Sahel?
Thank you, Christina. And let me start with the second one. I mean, more than 50% of the population are women and girls. So clearly they play a role in strengthening community solidarity or community cohesion and so on. I think that you can approach it from three aspects. Firstly, obviously, many are victims of sexual harassment and attacks and so on. But secondly, they are not just victims. They can be instigators as well. And I mean, again, this is just an anecdote, but we know that in some communities where there is no other opportunity, women are pushing their sons or their nephews to go and join these groups in order to sustain the family and have the other kids to be somewhat taken care of or fed. And so they can be a push factor as well for radicalization and recruitment. Thirdly, women and girls can be very much the agents of change. And I think this is the aspect that GCSP and its partners are very much focusing on in order to ensure that we know that the biggest influence on boys and men are the mothers, and they can reach out to them and engage with them in a way that shapes their future. Therefore, investing in this agency of women and girls, whether through economic programs, whether through awareness raising, strengthening their critical thinking skills and digital literacy, are all things that some are very invisible, but in the long term, they definitely increase their resilience and their ability to influence for the positive the men and the boys around them. Going back to your first question, how can we improve access to education and economic opportunities? This is a long-term thing. In order to, and we have seen the incredible negative effect of closing down so many schools. I mean, at some point, and don't quote me on the number, but it was a very small portion of primary schools and secondary schools that have been functioning, and hundreds of them had to be closed down. And we know that from many other conflicts that for a sustained long time, if kids cannot go to schools, they will do something else, and they will be so easily to be lured into activities that are organized crime or other initiatives. Therefore, trying to, and we are very much supporting especially vulnerable children, on those that have been mainly only attending religious education. And of course, you can become an imam or a religious leader, but maybe there is no need for so many religious leaders. So try to diversify the skills of these children, for instance, in Mali, and try to bring them back also to the mainstream education system and provide them with vocational skills and other things so they can take on other professions as well. I think the economic we have discussed, and there are specific programs that GCSP is supporting both in Mali and Burkina that are targeting women's economic empowerment. I don't like the word empowerment because I don't think women need to be empowered in a colonial sense of this word, but much rather giving them opportunities to be engaged and be an active member and contributing agent of change for peace.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor now to questions. So who would like to begin? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Nicolas Godel, Work Finance. I'm a GCSP alumni. Thank you very much, Serge. It's addressed to Serge. We've been seeing recently in Brazil some lone wolves with incredible arsenal of weapons, and they come of nowhere. They're Brazilians. They're not any link with any countries. How do you see that for the future for Brazil and mostly for Latin America?
So what we clearly see is this nexus or the interaction between organized crime and terrorist groups also, or the potential for terrorist groups. And so the smuggling routes are well known. And the smuggling routes, you will find everything on it. You will find money, you will find resources, you will find weapons, you will find people, you will find drugs and many other things. When we look at Central and Latin America, we cannot look at it as being, far, far away, nothing is happening down there. There's a clear connection between the Middle East, between groups being active in Africa, in the Middle East, and other parts of the world, and Central and Latin America also. There are locations within this region, within Central and Latin America, where terrorists are trained and then sent back to different conflict areas in the world. And you can imagine when those people go this way and then come back, that other stuff is going to do just the other way around. So I think arms smuggling, weapons, drugs, everything is exchanged when there's this other realm of organized crime, which is deeply connected with terrorist groups throughout the world for financing. And basically, especially when you look at the Sahel, there's a close correlation there between the two aspects, where one is creating the better environment for the other to thrive in what they are doing.
How do you see that in 10 years in Brazil, for example?
I think it's very difficult to do predictions about this, but this is an existing connection. There's an existing interaction between both. And as we have seen, as the situation is going to continue to deteriorate or maybe be at the same level, we did not really receive positive remarks from my left side. We can just imagine that this is going to continue to exist also. It will all depend on also depend on the levels of resilience of the countries in which it is happening, and which type of terrorism will be I would say executed down there. But the availability of weapons, the availability, it's worldwide. We see that also in Europe. You can basically find them whenever you want and at a good price. So that's definitely not only a Brazilian or a Southern American problem. it's a global problem. Also, access to weapons, and the more, and that's maybe, you know, I was just giving you this explanation there with the conflict. But the more we pump weapons within conflicts, the more we will find them back on the black market and on those circuits also. We already, I mean, all the weapons used for those massive attacks in Europe, in Brussels, in Paris, and other places, all emanated from the Balkan. So basically the conflict which used to, was very active there about 20, 25 years ago. We already find weapons that have been donated to Ukraine. We can already find them back on the black market, on the dark web. You can already buy them over there. So that's also an issue. The more we will have conflicts, the more weapons will be in circulation, the more eventually they will also be available on the black market or in organized crime.
Good question. Thank you.
Wolfgang Münch, I'm a retiree of the UN in Geneva. Many thanks to all panelists at first for your presentation. 2 years ago, I had the pleasure to participate in a study tour of the German UN Association to Senegal. And in our meetings with representatives of the government and from civil society, we addressed the subject of political developments in the Sahel area, including increasing terrorism. Our interlocutors, all of them, they assured us that terrorism has no chance in Senegal. Senegal people cannot be led into temptation by Islamic fundamentalists or by whomever, you can be assured. I wonder whether you share this optimism.
Well, you want to? Oh, we can ask one more question.
I can go first. I think it's there's a lot of propaganda in the answer for sure. Everybody can be a victim of recruitment radicalization. I would say it all depends on your level of resilience and basically what we would call levels of one hand on the global peace index. So where are you ranked? What is your potential for conflict? And on the other hand, also levels of positive peace. A lot of questions that have been asked, or a lot of the topics that we have discussed today can be related to positive peace, which is basically the elements we need to create a peaceful society and a stable society. We spoke about human capital with education. We spoke about governance. We spoke about corruption. We spoke about good relations with your neighbors, basically all the pillars of positive peace. So we need to look, I mean, I don't have it by heart, I don't know it by heart, the position of Senegal on both those indexes and see if there is a potential for, slide into violence and slide into destabilization. I think since you visited the country, Senegal has evolved very positively with the new government. So maybe they are trying to make their promise come true, right? But I think it's very ambitious to say that nobody will ever listen to the sound of radicalization or recruitment. And I think you have explained it very well, Lila. It's it's only the minority of people joining those groups who really believe in the ideology that they are faced with. The vast majority of people joining our groups do this for socioeconomic reasons, right? And I was really pleased that you also said, like, there is also pressure from the community they come from to basically sustain the community. I mean, it's easy when there or somewhere else. I mean, the example that I have is people in Morocco and Tunisia and other places. When you go and have a decent job and you get around between 100 and 250 euros, I mean, of course, euros per month to do a decent job, you cannot sustain neither your family nor your community. And there is this other employer there who is giving you between $1,000 and $2,000 or euros per month. Which one are you going to choose, right? And so this is where the basis is. So very ambitious. I would be more humble in defining the potential for radicalization. But it is true that the more resilient and the more, I would say, the highest the levels of, the more stable your society is, the lower the chances for recruitment and radicalization also, and the chances for those groups to thrive. Basically, what are those groups looking for is lack of governance, replacing the government when it's not there, basically providing the public goods to populations which we do not receive anymore the support of central government. I mean, I've trained young Libyans about 2018, and so there was a group there coming from the city of Sirte, explaining to me that they applauded when the Islamic State came to Sirte, because it was the first time in a long period of time that there was at least a framework and some form of security and stability. Of course, with completely crazy ruler, but you need to imagine that populations prefer to have that than complete anarchy and lack of security. So that's what we need to think about. Like, what are the prerequisites to stop those groups to thrive or to give them fertile soil for their radicalization?
Thank you so much. I have two great questions from our online community, so I just wanted to highlight them. One of the persons online wanted to mention that ISGS in Niger last week just attacked and 40 civilians were killed. So a dramatic attack there. But he also wanted to ask whether or not, he said that ISGS is weakening in Central Sahel. And he wondered if that had to do with this new military cooperation within the three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and what you would like to say about that.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for the question. I wonder if one can definitely say that the Islamic State in the Great Sahara is weakening, because all things are relative to Geneva, which has speed and now expanding everywhere and very large territorial footprint, not only in all of the three countries. But if we assume that relatively to Geneva, it is less in a dominant position, we can maybe look at correlation. I think the Islamic State in the Great Sahara was, before its current incarnation, the Al-Murabitun, directed by the Sahrawis, which are from Western Sahara and are more North African leadership style. On the contrary, the Geneva, which is one of its greater components, is the former Front de Libération du Massina, the Massina Liberation Front from Amadou Koufa, who happened to be a Fulani, which is more distributed in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso and elsewhere. And if you have been following, Geneva astutely and cleverly used this transversal Fulani element to not only do propaganda, recruit, and also attack both sides, as to create ethnic tensions and sometimes casualties as a nurturing pool of recruitment. And so Geneva has a strategy which is more endogenic, giving priorities to local leaders. If you look at Burkina Faso, for instance, Ansarul al-Islam, which was created by two brothers, the Diko brothers. The big brother was killed, but now his brother is heading the movement. I think Geneva has more grassroots in the jihadi ecosystem than Al-Sahrawi, because they tend to bring this northern Algerian former Mujahideen style. This is one explication one can look at, but I wouldn't write them off, because as he exemplified, they just killed a lot of civilians, and you never can exclude that they may opportunistically work together, as for instance in the case of the Malian rebels, northern rebels, which after the defeat at the end of Wagner and the Malian army, are now building a coalition to resist the Malian army.
Thank you so much.
Christina, sorry, just
yes.
maybe if I may add just two quick points on the Senegal question. I mean, in Senegal, there is this conflict in Casamance for decades now, which it's a low-level conflict and is going up and down depending on who is in power. But exactly like if there is no control by the central state, then this is going to be exploited, can be very easily exploited by different violent extremists or terrorist groups in order to fill this vacuum that the lack of governance, the lack of services that are being created is filled by them. On the Fulani and the Jinim issue, I think we are seeing this also in Ghana and in some of the coastal states as well, that there is an influx of Fulanis who are being pushed because of various reasons. It can be climate or looking for pasture into the coastal states. And that creates a conflict between the original population that are there and the incoming Fulanis from Burkina and from elsewhere. And again, this tension can be very easily exploited by the different non-state or terrorist groups. And that's why, like, some of the programs that, again, GCSP is supporting, for instance, in northern Ghana, are exactly to ease this tension and share resources between the incoming Fulinis, the refugees from Burkina, and the local population. So I think there are so many nuances here that need to be taken into account.
Thank you so much. I wanted just to highlight, you mentioned in the report that lone wolf terrorism is on the rise. What can we do to thwart lone wolf terrorist groups? And we saw that a lot of the Western countries have been good at foiling many of the attacks. You had a whole list. I just wondered what is working now in the sense that foiling some of these attacks.
Oh, I'm not really sure we're really foiling a lot. I think we've been lucky in a lot of those actions also. As I explained before, when in the case of lone wolves, it's fast radicalization and a direct movement to the core, basically from non-violent to extremely violent. So how do you want, I think it's more a question of, there's a lot of luck there for security and intelligence services to just find one. Basically, the haystack is becoming bigger and the needle is becoming smaller when you look at it. That's basically the image that you need to understand when it comes to lone wolf actors. As I said before, not even for that, but also for the groups themselves. I was in an interview I think in June last year, where they were in interview. I was in a panel and they were asking about, are we facing the summer of all dangers, with the Olympic Games, the football Euro, and I don't know, whatever, Tour de France and whatever was going on in Europe. And then this came at the same moment than a threat report in Belgium, for example. And they were saying, like, yeah, everything is okay. We only need to keep an eye on 600 people in Belgium. And I was like, excuse me, in 2016, when we were hit, that were 500 people we needed to keep an eye on. We couldn't do it last time. When I look at the counterterrorism section on the Belgian police today, it's half of it was in 2016. So what are you talking about? The threat is higher. We have less people to take care of it. So I'm not really sure that we live in a safer society. When you look at the steps that have been taken in Europe as such since the peak of terrorism, since we have been targeted, yes, we communicate a bit more. Yes, there is a bit more exchange. I'm not really sure that the evolution of the past weeks and months is going to foster that. I think to the contrary. I think we are going more towards individual actions and individual data collecting. And structurally, we did not really change a lot. I think the only thing where we really invested in the past 10 years, to say it like this, is countering financing and money laundering for this terrorist organization. The only two basically legislative actions at the level of the European Union were exactly on those two topics. And as you have said, I created my own company in 2018. Well, good luck if you want to create a company nowadays, because we need to sign American documents giving them access to every transaction going on your bank accounts in Europe or on the bank accounts of your company in Europe. Otherwise, you cannot even create a company in Europe also. So I think there is this false idea that everything is going fine and we are better prepared than 10 years ago. I don't think so. I think structurally we did not really change a lot. I think that the threat is still there, and we need to be very careful not to fall into the same, not to do the same mistakes that in those regions most impacted today. Because why is Niger going up and down in the figures? Why do we see resurgence of violence in northeastern Nigeria? And why do we see that at some point, large terrorist organizations are not able to target us as they did in the past because of those security pressures? We have this coalition. Of course, we have the defense forces in each of the countries, definitely Nigeria also. We have this multinational joint task force for the Lake Chad Basin. We still have, we had the coalition against Daesh in Syria and Iraq. So it's nice. We see all those figures go down during the security crash. But we all know that we cannot keep the security down for a longer period of time. I think the coalition against Daesh, because the West is participating in it, has the capacity to do so, and we see the results. When we come to the Sahel, the security force in the Sahel, this potential is not so present. So as soon as you release the security crash, you see the same people, the same groups just start where they left it up and impact again. And so that's why you see those countries going up and down. So what we need to realize is that during the security crash, which is necessary, don't get me wrong, we need to transform the societies. And thank you, GSIR, for trying to do so. We need to transform those societies. We need to take away the fertile soil for radicalization, recruitment, and violence in those countries. If we just leave those countries like this, and if we think stupidly that security is going to take care of all the evil there and all the problems of the region, I think we are making a huge mistake. And that's a mistake we should not do in the West.
Thank you. And we also need to be better role models. As you can see now, our democracies are declining and a rule of law is also weakening. So as we've seen in the past, when democratic states weaken, it gives much more opportunities for right-wing extremists and terrorists to grow. So on that happy note, I think we need to end this session. I really wanted to thank you all for coming. I know the weather outside is really beautiful at the moment, and the fact that you're here is really, really nice. And thank you so much. I also want to thank our panelists for their extraordinary expertise. Let's give them a big round of applause. I'd like to thank all the people who have worked in the background to make this happen. So thank you so much for Thierry Rondon, Antoine, and Florian Gollet, who's in the background, who has made all the technology magic happen. So thank you so much. I wish you all a good afternoon. We're going to have another Geneva security debate on the 15th of April, and it's on the geoeconomics of trade in the new geopolitical world. I hope you will be able to join us then. And thank you, and have a good afternoon.
So there will be a movement flow, like a migration back to